Welcome to The Weekly. I'm Heather McKenzie, filling in for Jeff Axt. This week is all about adcomms and earnings. The FDA released briefing documents for two advisory committee meetings taking place today and tomorrow, and it's looking like both Replimune and Capricor are in for a tough slog. Meanwhile, GSK, AstraZeneca, and Roche announced Q2 results. Sarepta has a new CEO, and Amgen has launched a full-court press to defend its embattled rare disease drug, Tavneos. Let's get started. Hi, Annalee. Welcome back.
Hi. Thank you. Yeah, I feel like, have I been off the podcast for two weeks, 3
2
weeks?
weeks. Yeah, I don't think, we missed you, but how was your vacation? How's your garden looking now?
My vacation was good. It was a little long, but it was nice. And yeah, I came back. I had somebody taking care of my garden the whole time, but it turns out I've been like lovingly nursing a weed, which is now like 5 feet tall in my garden. I thought it was a dahlia. It's not.
Maybe you could get it classified as something else, like a new flower.
Well, I wish, but it does already have a name. It's apparently called pigweed.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a type of amaranth, which is a plant that some people grow for beauty, but not this particular variety. It's just a weed. So now I have to decide what to do with it because it's like really tall and like as tall as my other dahlias.
Is it pretty?
No.
Yeah. Maybe it's run its course.
Yeah. And I don't know. Maybe I can put in some petunias or something in that spot just because I feel like something should be there.
Well, I've had a garden win, although it's not really my own win because I don't have a green thumb, but my mom does. And I bought a sunflower plant earlier this year and it was dying, like May or June. It had no chance. But my mom saved it and it now has 15 nice sunflowers.
Amazing. I love my sunflowers. I have a few of them and next year, I don't know, I need to plant 1,000,000 of them. They just bring me so much joy.
I know. They're my favorite flower. Well, Gabrielle is not with us this week just because she has some technical difficulties. So it'll just be Annalee and myself. But let's get to intros. Why don't you go first?
Sure. Annalee Armstrong. I am senior editor at Biospace, and I do the Biopharm Executive newsletter each week, which hits your inboxes Wednesday morning.
All right. And I am Heather McKenzie, senior editor at Biospace, and I curate Clinica Space, which hits your inboxes very early on Monday morning. Well, let's get right to it. Let's start the show off with maybe what's the most dramatic news of the week, the FDA's big advisory committee comeback. So the Capricor Therapeutics saga continues. The FDA is now disputing the success of Capricor's phase 3 trial. The disagreement over whether or not Capricor's Duchenne muscular dystrophy therapy met the trial's primary endpoints was revealed in briefing documents on Monday ahead of an FDA advisory committee meeting, which is happening Wednesday, which is today if you're listening to us.
Yeah, so this has been a pretty busy week for the FDA on the regulatory front. So starting with Capricor, the FDA released their briefing documents ahead of that meeting on Monday, and they revealed that they disagreed with Capricor's claims that a phase 3 trial met its primary endpoint. This was pretty stunning. I can't think of a time that I've ever seen this. The FDA basically said that after Capricor completed the randomized double-blind part of the trial, changes were made to the pre-specified statistical analysis plan during the open label portion of the trial where all patients received the cell therapy, and that generated at least 2 additional versions of that analysis.
Yeah, and you're not the only one who was stunned. I spoke with Capricor CEO Linda Marban yesterday afternoon, and she had already said that she was surprised that the meeting was called. She didn't know why or what issues they wanted to discuss. Well, Capricor is in the know now. So apparently the SAP, or statistical analysis plan, the FDA reviewers analyzed in the documents was a draft that Capricor only submitted after the FDA asked for all SAP drafts. So there seems to be some communication issues here. But she expressed confidence that the adcom members would, quote, be able to see through the statistical analysis plans and not turn this into something mathematical, but instead look at the effectiveness of the therapy across all of Capricor's trials.
This has been a really tough journey for Capricor, right? Like this has been going on for more than a year now.
Yeah, I've been following this story for feels like 2 years, but I guess it maybe is only a year. It's just been a really long year, especially for Capricor. But yeah, it's been very long and windy. This was, in fact, one of the biotechs that was featured on an awesome graphic that Annalee made of a roller coaster. There's a little bit of background here if you haven't been following the story. Capricor's first application for a cell therapy called deramiocel was rejected in July last year. And this was after a planned adcom was canceled without the company's prior knowledge. So Capricor and deramiocel have also been at the center of an internal FDA clash last summer. So the first adcom, the one that never happened, was scheduled by Nicole Verdun, former top regulator of cell and gene therapies at CBER, sorry. And then former CBER head Vinay Prasad unilaterally canceled the meeting, and Verdun and her deputy Raquel Anatol were soon to follow out the door.
So this all ties back into the crazy leadership upheaval that's been happening at the FDA. Now we're seeing a return of these AdCom meetings, but it seems like the FDA is really kind of holding the line on some of these decisions that came down over that tumultuous period last year.
Yeah, which is surprising because it seemed like it was going the other way. We've written a number of articles the past couple of months about how the FDA has seemed to be a little bit more flexible, and now it's kind of seeming like last year again. But Linda Marbane is not the only one who is surprised at the course that some of these adcoms are taking. One of our writers, Michael Gibney, spoke with ex-regulators and other experts, and some of them were surprised that the FDA has actually resumed adcoms at all while they're still trying to staff back up, and others have questioned the rationale behind the meetings and others that are scheduled. So you can check out that piece in Clinica Space this week.
Yeah, and now jumping over to Replimune, which is also having an AdCom this week. We just wrote that up on Tuesday morning in the FDA briefing docs. Again, the FDA came out really strongly and saying that the data package that Replimune has submitted is potentially not sufficient to support approval. The FDA is still very critical of Replimune's use of a single-arm study to support the application for the drug in melanoma. They said that the phase 2 study, which is called IGNITE, is not interpretable. This is a tough word. I really struggled. But anyway, so they also questioned the benefit that was shown in the trial. So it was, again, a really strong statement from the agency coming out in these documents. Replimune, of course, had the chance to defend themselves in their own response to the documents. They said that a randomized trial would have been unethical in this population, and they cited experts who have said that. They also argued that other companies like Iovance, Merck, and Bristol Myers Squibb have actually received approvals in melanoma based on single-arm trials. So there's some precedent here for the FDA executing regulatory flexibility. So after all, or with these documents out now, the meeting will occur on Thursday. The AdCom has been asked to vote on whether the efficacy results are valuable and clinically meaningful. And just a reminder, the FDA does not have to follow what an AdCom does. They typically do. In very rare occasions, they'll go against what an AdCom says. But I think we can definitely expect some pretty robust discussions at these meetings.
Yeah, and this whole thing regarding the single arm trial that Replimune used, this has been the FDA's issue from the very beginning. It was mentioned in the first complete response letter that was last July, and then the second one in April of this year. So it might sound kind of dire for Replimune and RP1 right now. However, this drug has a lot of advocates out there. I think there were 22 clinical leaders, scientists who submitted a petition last year in support of RP1. So, you just have to wonder, are any of those guys on the committee, and what chance do they really have? But we will have continuing coverage of both Capricor and Replimune this week. Well, turning to second quarter earnings, at Biospace, we like to playfully call this earnings hell week, but Annalee secretly loves it.
You?
So let's start off with GSK.
Yeah, so Gabby Mason covered this one this morning, and some big news on this call. GSK announced a 3-year savings plan that is ultimately supposed to save $2.5 billion. This is money that CEO Luke Meals says will largely go back into accelerating R&D efforts. He took the reins of GSK at the start of this year. So this is like his first really big implementation of kind of like a change at this company. He's executed a couple of deals so far, but definitely a change in tone from Emma Walmsley, who stepped down at the end of the year. She's still actually with the company until September in an advisory capacity, as often happens with these big CEO changes. So definitely the ship is changing, moving in a different direction at GSK. So we'll see how this goes.
It was a good second quarter publication or presentation because they got a 6% bump in their stock this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Investors really reacted favorably to this news. And elsewhere in their earnings, they announced a bunch of other changes. They're going to be investing $530 million to relocate an R&D center to Cambridge. At the same time, they also incurred a $2.4 billion impairment charge for R&D efforts, which last year that was only $633 million. So that's a pretty big jump. A lot of that came from the discontinuation of camlipixant, which was in chronic cough. That drug had come from the $2 billion buyout of Bellis Health a few years ago. So unfortunately, that drug did not stand up in the clinic as GSK had hoped. So they've had to write that one off. They're still kind of pushing that drug in irritable bowel syndrome. So we'll see if it has maybe some market hopes. But that was certainly a disappointment for GSK.
Well, GSK's British neighbor, AstraZeneca, also announced earnings this week. And despite their stumble a couple of weeks ago with their ATTR drug, Wainua, which failed in late-stage ATTR-CM, executives don't seem concerned. So CEO Pascal Soriot said Monday that the company is, quote, very much on track, end quote, to hit its 2030 goal of reaching $80 billion in revenue. So we'll see how that goes. Still to come this week, we have Sanofi, BMS, Moderna, and more. But I personally always find these smaller biotechs more interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And we have taken a look at 5 biotechs that have some exciting quarters to report on. I think what a really cool trend is about a lot of these companies is that they are kind of pushing their own therapies onto the market themselves, which is really cool. These are some scrappy biotechs. We always love to see that. So you can check out that report in Biopharm Executive this week. We go into detail on Agios, Arrowhead, and a couple other companies and give you an expectation of what will happen on the earnings calls to come.
All right, looking forward to reading that. Well, in other business-related news, Sarepta has named a new CEO who started on Tuesday.
Yeah, so this is big news, kind of wrapping up a story that we've been talking about for a while. I mean, the Sarepta saga is not over. There's still a lot to come from this company, but this closes one chapter as Doug Ingram steps away. So Sarepta has hired Michael Severino. He was most recently the CEO of flagship pioneering biotech Tessera, which does gene writing. So Severino stepped down from that role earlier this month and apparently now to lead Sarepta. Doug Ingram is retiring, according to Sarepta. This was kind of a stunning story earlier this year. He announced his departure and said that 2 of his family members had been diagnosed with one of the conditions his company is actually researching, which is called myotonic dystrophy. So that was a pretty unique situation at Sarepta.
Well, Severino is going to have a pretty tough job. So Sarepta is awaiting 2 FDA decisions for full approval for its exon skippers, Amondys 45 and Vyondys 53. And those are both for Duchenne. And they both failed their confirmatory trials. So those decisions are expected early next year. Well, speaking of drama and sagas, another biopharma saga got another chapter on Friday when Amgen launched a full-court press to defend its rare disease drug Tavneos.
Yeah, so this is something we've been waiting for a while. Amgen has been really fiercely defending this rare disease drug, but now they have officially responded to the FDA's request to withdraw the therapy. They did that in a rather large statement. They provided some data and some real-world analysis to the agency, and they are now requesting a hearing with the FDA to discuss the matter. Earlier this year, Amgen's Japanese partner revealed that 20 patients there had died after taking Tavneos from a complication, potentially. And now both the FDA and European medicines agencies have recommended that the drug be withdrawn. So, and then there was also news that a key study that was used to support the approval was withdrawn from the New England Journal of Medicine. That is kind of one of the premier medical journals out there. So Amgen is continuing its defense. So in this data package, they are including real world evidence and some patient testimonials. The company argues that patients are seeing real benefit from Tavneos, including relief from taking steroids that can have really difficult side effects.
Yeah, I think isn't Tavneos the only drug that's shown efficacy in this population? I believe I'm not entirely sure on that, but I know there's a really high unmet need. Well, finally, Annalie, what else have we got in Biopharma Exec this week?
I took a deep dive into the intellectual property challenges that come with all of these deals that are happening in China. So we have pharmas going over to China. They are finding assets that they really want to license and bring back to the United States. However, that can raise a lot of challenges when it comes to IP. So I talked to a bunch of patent attorneys to figure out where the risks may be. One thing they pointed to, they really wanted to highlight, was that the Biosecure Act could raise some risk downstream. So these are early assets. However, if you have a patent for manufacturing that was signed earlier, patent attorneys who are doing these deals really need to understand that and make sure that if that company is flagged as a company that could be a danger to national security, they could have some problems later on with manufacturing. So you can check out that feature in Biopharm Executive this week, in addition to the earnings recap for biotechs.
Well, sounds good. That's it for us this week. Enjoy the rest of your July, and we will be back with you next week when it will be August.